Good evening to you all. Hope you are all well and enjoying our little channel. If you are, please do not forget to subscribe and click a few of the like buttons. However, above all, please just enjoy the content. Here are some very short real-life Abdl stories from the archives. I had a pretty rough growing up. In the beginning, I was the baby in the family of 9. Then my sister was born. I was in the 1st grade and she was 2. She had diapers. I didn't anymore. Sad face. So one night I snuck into the hall closet where mom keep her diapers in and took one out and put it on. It felt good being a baby again. One of my older sisters caught me, but she never told anyone. She's my favorite sister today. Ever since that night, I've been sneaking diapers. I found lots of ways to get them, diapers. Once my grandma was in a hospital and I seen a bag of diapers for adults. I grabbed some and put it in my book bag. I just like the way they feel and makes me feel safe inside, like angels watching over me. It's like I can hear the heartbeat of a mom nearby and as if no one could ever hurt me. I was hurt a lot when I was a boy and I used diapers to get away from everybody. If I have diapers on and no one's around, no one could bother me. The end. First encounter. I was 4 years old and I was watching TV with my 2 other brothers. It was getting close to bedtime. My mother comes into the living room and takes me by the wrist and was marching me down the hall and yelling at me for wetting the bed, and how she was sick of it. When we entered the kitchen, I could see a bottle of baby powder on the table. I was picked up and laid on the table, and then I saw the rest of it. Diapers and plastic pants. My mother was mad and she must have worked herself into that position. She started pulling my pants off and my underwear at the same time. I remember, I was screaming like hell and she kept smacking the side of my legs. I kept yelling, "No, no, no." I was powdered and diapered. Then she pulled my knees up towards my chin and put a pair of plastic pants on me. I was made to stand on the chair while she finished pulling the plastic pants into position. I was not a happy camper. I remember her telling me to go play with your brothers or go to bed. I went into the living room, but I sat on the other side because I didn't want my 2 brothers making fun of me. When I went to bed that night, all I could smell was baby powder and the aroma of a brand new pair of plastic pants. When I awoke the next morning, I was wet as usual, but when I got out of bed, all I did was slide my diapers and plastic pants off. I was mad and wanted my mother to pick them up. So I left them on the floor next to the bed. I do not ever remember her diapering me again. The end. My mother and stepfather were married when I was very young. My stepfather was a barber and had his own shop. I was about 5 years old and one Sunday we all loaded into the car and drove to the shop. My stepfather was having some major plumbing problems in the bathroom of the shop. There were tools all over the floor and the water was shut off and the toilet was disconnected. My mother was cleaning the floors and windows and my stepfather was busy at the job he was trying to handle. I remember telling my mother that I had to go to the bathroom. You know, the number 2. She told me to go across the parking lot to the gas station. Well, that seemed reasonable. I went to the door and took off to the gas station. I asked the guy if I could use his bathroom. "It's busted and out of order," was his reply. Oh, this is not good. I did everything I could to hold it. I would have stood on my head if I thought that would help. Well, Mother Nature stepped in and I let loose. I filled my underpants to the max and knew I was in trouble with my mother. I went back inside and told my mother I was sorry, that I couldn't help it and I tried everything. She was mad, but she really wasn't that mad. I guess it was more of a frustrated mad having to contend with me. I was standing in the middle of the barber shop and she was removing my pants and peeling off my underwear. What a smell! She took a barber towel and wet it in the sink. She started to clean me up. After she was done, she put together a bunch of barber towels. This made a really thick diaper that she pinned on me with barber clips. There was nothing else to do. My underpants were ruined and my jeans had to be washed. She put the underpants in a plastic bag and told me to go outside and throw them in the trash. I went outside in my makeshift diapers and the guy across the parking lot at the gas station was pumping gas into someone's car. He spotted me and was laughing his head off. I was so embarrassed. I ran back into the shop and stayed there until it was time to go home. I spent the entire day in those diapers. I didn't mind my stepfather, my mother, or brother seeing me, but I didn't want anyone else to see me. When we got home, my mother told me to go and get changed. By this time I didn't want to. I liked being in diapers. I wanted the plastic pants to go with them. But, all good things come to an end. The end. I lived on a dead-end street and there was a house across from us. They had 2 young girls and were about 1 and 3 years of age. They had a clothes line right beside their house and you had to be Helen Keller not to notice what was hanging on the line. Among regular clothes hanging on the line, she also hung juvenile printed diapers and plastic pants. Being the bedwetter I was and seeing I could get free diapers, well, the rest came easy. I would sneak across the driveway and onto their land to the clothes line. I would steal some of the printed diapers. The plastic pants were safe as they were too small. I took the diapers home and upstairs into my room. I went back downstairs and into the bathroom and found some safety pins and I grabbed a small trash can liner. I also took some Scotch tape. I was on a mission. After getting back to my room, I stripped down to my birthday suit and laid a couple of the diapers on the floor and laid on top. I pulled them between my legs and pinned them real good. I laid out the trash can liner and laid on top of that and pulled that up between my legs as well. I taped the sides shut. Real tight. My aunt, mother's sister, was living with us. My mother owned her own business and my stepfather had a separate job. My aunt was to clean the house and do everything my mother could not do. Well, I had gone to bed with my diapers and a trash can liner between my legs. When I had woke up the next morning I was wet and not the bed. I took the pins off and started to play with myself. I was just getting into some fun when the door opened up and my aunt saw me. She saw everything. Printed diapers and a trash can liner as pants. I turned as red as a stop sign. She closed the door and left. I took the diapers and plastic liner off and buried them as far back into the closet as I could. When I went to leave the house she pinched me on the rear end as I was leaving. She was probably wondering if that was really what she saw. And if I still had them on. She never said anything and I wasn't about to. Back then, there was no disposable diapers. The cloth was the real deal and plastic pants. The end. I was 7 years of age and felt myself as grown up now, yeah, right. After school I went over to a friend's house and we were playing outside in his backyard. I had to pee and so I went into the house. When I entered the bathroom, on the floor beside the bathtub was my friend's little sister's wet diapers and plastic pants. I locked the bathroom door and took off all my clothes. I put the wet diapers on and pulled the plastic pants up over them. There was no diaper pins and so when I went to get up to admire myself in the mirror they started to slide down my legs. I laid on the floor and it felt good to be a baby again. I took them off and dressed and went back outside to play with my friend. I wanted to be a baby again seeing as my own childhood was messed up. My parents were always arguing and I remember laying in bed and rocking my head from side to help drown out the noise. It was the turning point of my days from being a young boy to a much younger boy. I was in a turmoil or cyclone of some sort and did not know how to get out. The end. I was about 5 years old. My brother and I both wet the bed. One night, my dad was very angry with us both because of yellowed sheets and made us lie down on the bed and diapered us both. I remember my grandmother looking in from the other room. I remember being very ashamed. The only other memory of diapers at this young age was waking up with a wet diaper and trying to convince my mother that it wasn't very wet. When I was about 9 or 10, I tried on one of my baby sister's diapers. I immediately fell in love with how it felt. I began to wear diapers frequently when my other brothers and sisters wouldn't see me. I loved the bulky feel between my legs and the soft cloth rubbing my buttocks. Eventually, I started wearing them to grade school and junior high. It was too risky to wear them to high school, so they stayed at home. I tried to give them up for years until I discovered DPF and realized that others had the same problem I did. I searched the internet and books regarding infantilism to try to understand myself. After marriage, my wife found diapers laying around in drawers and in suitcases. She asked me about them, but I was too ashamed to tell her what I was doing. When my children were young, I would even try on their diapers late at night or downstairs in my workshop, the cloth 20x30s. Eventually, I had the nerve to tell my wife. What a relief that was! She was very unhappy about it, but has accepted the fact that I like to wear them, especially to bed. I have not yet revealed that I sometimes like to wet in them. I attempted to settle her fears by letting her read some of the literature on DLAB. I explained that it did not decrease my desire for her and had nothing to do with children. I explained the sense of peace and comfort I derived from wearing them. I am now nearing retirement. I have thanked God for letting me know others share my desires and that I am not some kind of freak. I find great comfort and security in wearing them, especially when I am stressed or ill. If anyone out there has not told his wife, you should do so. It takes a lot of pressure off. I needed to be sure my wife loved me unconditionally before I revealed that side of me to her. I was too ashamed of myself for the desires and too afraid that she would leave me to tell her at first. I finally revealed my secret to her at a time when she told me a deep secret of hers. Marriage is based on trust. It's the right thing to do to share this side of yourself. The end. When I wake each morning, I know my mommy is already up and busy. She can hear me playing with my activity center that's been placed in my crib. She has placed a monitor near my crib so she can hear me when I cry or just playing. Being a sissy baby has not always as nice as this. I was abused by my parents because I continually wet my bed at night and sometimes during the day whenever I was yelled at or belittled. My mother pretty much kept me in diapers and plastic panties all the time. But all that is a story for another time. When my mommy hears me playing in my crib, so comes into the nursery with a smile on her face and will ask, "How's my baby girl today?" She'll check my diaper and if it's just wet she'll get me up and give me mommy milk. When my mommy adopted me, she had just lost a baby that she was nursing, so she still had milk. After she nurses me, she then takes me into the bathroom, fills up the tub with bubble bath and my toys and lets me play for a little while. Then she comes, puts me on the changing table, powders and diapers me. Then it's time for breakfast. Sometimes the cereal ends up more on me than in my mouth. Mommy will clean me up again. After which she will dress me up for the day. Usually she'll put a pretty dress with a lot of ruffles or a cute smock on me depending on what we are going to. I get to wear my pretty rumba pants over my diaper, I like them. Sometimes we go to the petting zoo, or to the mall or do some visiting. After a busy day, mommy will put in the tub again to play a while, and sometimes mommy will climb in the tub too. We'll blow bubbles, wash my dollies and have a lot of fun. Then mommy will read me a story, and just before bed she'll nurse me again. Mommy will tweak her nipple to get it hard and the offer each breast to suckle. She'll brush back me hair from my eyes and say with a big smile, "What a lovely sissy baby. I'm so glad you came into my life. I am so glad that my mommy found me on that lousy day." That's a story for another time. Thanks to all ABs out there. The end. My childhood experience. To start off, I was an only child, born out of wedlock. In order to keep from putting me up for adoption, my mother put me in foster care with a local family that took in several young boys aged from 4 to 14. They had one child of their own, a daughter a year older than myself. My first account with diaper discipline was when I was 6. I was out playing in the yard with the other boys when I needed to use the bathroom. Not wanting to stop playing, I went behind a tree. The youngest boy, age 4, saw me and ran inside and told the woman what I'd done. I was called inside and without explanation, told to remove my clothes. While I started undressing, she called the other children in and had them stand at the far wall. I was scared and shaking as well as confused at why I was undressing. When I got down to my underwear, she snapped I was to remove all of my clothes. To stall from humiliation at the others watching me, I took off my shoes and socks first. Then as I pulled my t-shirt over my head, I heard her tell her daughter to go and get a couple of the baby's diapers and some diaper pins. It was at that point I knew what she planned and I went into sheer panic. She yanked my shirt off and while I kicked and screamed, she dragged me to the kitchen table and forced me up and onto my back. I continued to scream and beg for her to stop, but she just grabbed my underpants and started pulling them down. My feet hit her face and knocked her glasses off, making her madder as she called the other boys to hold me down. Her daughter entered and handed her the diapers as she wedged in between my legs to keep them apart. Though my eyes were full of tears, I tried to see what she was doing and saw her folding the diapers to fit me. I turned my head and saw the daughter grinning as I felt a tremendous rush of shame and humiliation sweep over me. Just then the mother told her daughter to leave the room until she was called back. She then pulled my underpants off while the boys kept me from resisting. I could do nothing but cry as she pulled the diapers tightly between my legs and fastened them with the pins. She then sat me up and told me that since I didn't want to go to the bathroom like a big boy, I could now use my diapers like a baby. I was then stood across the room to face my peers while she instructed them to call me a baby and point at my diapers. I cried out of control as I stared down at the floor while trying to cover my condition with my hands. "Put your hands behind your back so everyone can see what a little baby you are," she demanded as I obeyed in fear. I was then told to look up and tell everyone that I was a baby and that I needed to wear diapers because I didn't want to use the bathroom. I could only whimper her demand as everyone was again coaxed to laugh and call me a baby. I could see on their faces that they too were scared, but they did as told and kept calling me a little baby who has to wear diapers. After what seemed an eternity, she told everyone to return outside to play. She then turned to me and said, "You too." I was again horrified as I begged to remain indoors. To my surprise she said okay, but added I was not to try and remove the diapers until she said I could. I went into the living room to stay away from view, but she followed me and pointed to the baby's playpen and told me to climb into it. My mind was in a numb, dazed state as I blankly obeyed with her help getting over the rail. The baby was also in the pen and I was told to sit down and play nicely or I'd get a spanking. She then returned to the kitchen. I felt very strange sitting there looking at the baby who was also dressed in a diaper, except she also had on a short dress. My mind was in such a withdrawn state by now that I can't remember what happened from that point on until later when I was let out to go eat lunch. When I entered the kitchen, I immediately spotted the high chair pulled up to the table as she ordered me to climb into it. I clearly remember her having difficulty snapping the tray into place and how it made me feel trapped as though I was tied up. I couldn't help glance at the other children and felt so shamed when I saw they were all grinning at my degrading predicament. I was given a very large glass of milk along with my meal and told I was to drink it all if I wanted to be let down after eating. I had never seen such a large drinking glass before, and for just a second I thought how strange it was, but the others' giggles broke my thought as I hung my head down to eat. I was the last to finish as I fought to finish all the milk. By the time I was let down, the other children had all returned outside to play. I thought I might have to return to the playpen, but she just let me wander off. It was sometime later when I again needed to use the bathroom. At the time I didn't relate it to the reason for the large glass of milk, but now, years later, I can see how she planned that too. Anyway, the need kept growing and I finally went to the woman and told her of my needs and begged to have the diapers removed so I could go to the bathroom. I was reminded about not wanting to use it before, and so now I didn't have to. I could use my diapers as that was what they are for. Though fresh fear swelled inside me, I thought she was just trying to scare me as additional punishment. Returning to the other room, I tried to push the need from my thoughts. More time passed and the need grew until I was cramping and folding over from pain. Without any other choice, I returned to her begging again to please let me use the bathroom along with promises I'd never wet outside again. She only repeated her earlier statement and again reminded me that was what the diapers were for. I really felt panic now as I knew she was really serious. I asked if I did use the diapers would she then remove them. She smiled as she calmly replied, "We'll see." I couldn't think about anything except the pains in my stomach and of my need to hold back my pending shame as I walked away. When I entered the living room, I saw the baby looking over at me just as I felt myself lose control. Quickly, I grabbed myself through the diapers in an attempt to thwart off further humiliation. Darting into the back den to keep from being seen holding myself, I felt the diapers getting wet around my fingers. Intense shame filled my mind as I realized I couldn't hold back any longer as my grip loosened and the diapers flooded along with my increased shame. The long-held call of nature had collected more than usual and I kept peeing until the diapers were totally soaked and it ran down both my legs and formed a large puddle on the linoleum floor. My shame was so great I burst into tears as I tried to step my bare feet out of the puddle. I guess my cries were heard because just as I looked up, there stood the woman with a very big grin on her face. "What have we here?" "Has baby wet his diapers?" she snickered with a victorious look. "You stay right there until I return." She then left as I started to half-heartedly think she was going to get something to clean me up and to return my clothes. Several moments passed as I stood looking down at my soaked condition, feeling so defeated and shamed. When she finally returned, she told me to follow her. My heart raced with anticipation that this punishment was about over as I quickly followed behind her. When we entered the living room, I immediately saw she had gathered the other children again as she grabbed my shoulders and forced me to face them. She then called their attention to my now soaked diapers while ordering me to tell them what baby did. I again burst into tears as I mumbled I had wet myself. "You wet yourself? You mean you wet your diapers just like a baby, don't you?" She tormented. I returned a tearful yes as I looked hard at the floor. Suddenly, my attention was brought to alert as she grabbed my arm tightly and dragged me across the floor and to the front door of the house. "I think we need to let everyone see what a little baby you really are," she said in a cold, yet pleased tone. At that she swung the door open and demanded I go out on the front steps so passerbys can see what baby did. I clung to the door frame screaming for mercy but she was far too strong as I was thrust out and the door closed quickly behind me. I thought I couldn't feel more humiliated and shamed at what had happened up to now but this pushed me to new limits. I had nowhere to hide as I slouched down in an attempt to hide the diapers as I stared at the cars as they passed by. I didn't remain out there but for a few moments but it was enough to tear the last thread of self-worth from my soul. I was totally beaten and lost any spark of resistance from that moment on. I was finally allowed back inside and to this day I can't remember what happened for the rest of the day. My mind was so shocked that I went into some kind of dazed state. It wasn't until late that evening when it was time for bed that I again remember the following events. It was the custom at the house for each child to take a bath in turn and get into bed. I watched each boy go up the stairs in turn as I just stood there not knowing what I was supposed to do in my wet state of dress. After the last boy started up, the woman told me to go to my room and wait for her. I felt cold now as the wet, sagging diapers rubbed against me while I climbed the steps. When I entered the bedroom, the other boys were already in bed and sitting up staring at me. I still felt numb and distant as I stood by the door and stared at the floor to keep from looking at the others. As I stood there, thoughts that my ordeal was finally about to be over calmed me somewhat. When the woman entered, I looked up at her with wistful eyes and excitement at getting my own clothes back. It wasn't but a moment's fantasy as I watched her go over to my bed and pull the covers completely back and spread a flannel-covered rubber sheet on the bed. I again started to cry as I knew she was preparing it for me to sleep in my still damp diapers. "Okay. Get into bed," she ordered as I passively obeyed without any resistance. "Roll over on your stomach," came another order. Though this one confused me, I did as told. I immediately understood her demands as the wet diapers pressed against me, making my condition more vivid in my mind. The lights went out and I just laid there in the dark as the other boys began to whisper and giggle. I knew they were laughing at me, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I was exhausted and it didn't take long to fall asleep. True ending was my getting my own clothes back the next morning with a warning of more if I ever wet outside again. My childhood experience, fantasy cont. The next morning, I woke to loud voices as I sat up and tried to clear my eyes. Almost as quickly, I once again became aware of my shame garb as my heart returned to heavy beating. The boys had gathered around my bed and were snickering and calling me a baby. I had returned some sense of being, and the torments again brought on intense feelings of shame. I couldn't do anything but sit there while they had their fun as I felt my eyes tear up. I also felt a renewed need to again use the bathroom, but it was stronger than usual, I guess from drinking so much liquid last evening. I fought to keep my needs at bay while begging the others to leave me alone. On full public display, I couldn't even hold myself to ease nature's call. My mind was praying they would stop and go down to breakfast as time seemed to stand still. My diapers were almost dry now, though you could still smell the fact they had been wet in. Just then, the woman entered, hearing all the commotion, and told everyone to stop picking on the baby. I felt both relieved from her instructions and shamed at still being called a baby. She told everyone to get dressed and go down to breakfast as they quickly scurried. I looked up at her with pleading eyes as she asked me how I liked being a baby and not having to worry about using the bathroom anymore. I quickly replied I didn't like it as she told me to get up. I scooted myself to the edge of the bed and slid down to the floor. It felt cold on my bare feet and I gave a shudder from being nearly naked. She then said, "Well, we'll see if you are ready to be a big boy again. Now get down to breakfast." My heart sank as I dreaded having to again be on display to the others as I slowly walked into the hallway. As I passed the bathroom, I was reminded of my need to use it and felt a growing panic in fear of telling her and possibly having her again tell me that was what the diapers were for. I convinced myself I can hold on as it is almost over and I will soon have my own clothes back. As we entered the kitchen, I saw the high chair was back at the table again and knew what that meant as I automatically went over and climbed in. I was glad to have regular food like the others again and only a regular glass of milk to drink. All I could think of was what she had said about my being good and finally having my own clothes returned. I rushed to finish my food as though it would bring on the end to my punishment faster. When I finished everything, I asked to be let down only to be told I was to wait until the others had finished. She then went back into the pantry. As I sat there, time seemed to drag on and on as everyone appeared to be dragging it out just to torment me. My need to use the bathroom kept coming back in waves of demand that grew with each passing. Before long the need was getting the better of me as I tried to slip my hand under the tray to hold myself back. This wasn't easy as the tray was very tight against me and I had to squirm a little. One of the boys saw what I was doing and with great pleasure announced it aloud. "Does baby need to go pee-pee?" jeered the oldest boy with a sinister delight. I was found out as I surrendered and just grabbed myself permanently. I felt my body shiver once again as I tightened my grip. Now I couldn't let go for my resistance was gone. I was terrified as I looked around for the woman to plead to use the bathroom. Just then, one of the boys got up and came over. I stared at him as he teased me about needing to pee-pee. I cried for him to leave me alone only to have him grab my arm and pull my hold loose. I felt my face burn with shame as I felt my diapers again begin to grow in warmth and wetness. He quickly jumped back to his seat as the woman entered and saw the pee running off the chair and onto the floor. "What's this? You couldn't wait until after breakfast? Well, it seems you really are a baby who can't control himself." I cut in with a burst of cries that the others made me. I was cut off before I could tell what had happened, as she removed the tray and told me to get down. Every time I tried to speak, she smacked my bottom and told me I wasn't to talk anymore. That since I was going to continue to act like a baby, I was going to be made to behave like one from now on. My head was spinning with horror at her words as I could only cry louder with each slap. "Now stand right there until I get a mop and clean up your mess," she snapped with renewed anger. When she left the room, the boy who victimized me came over and told me I'd better keep quiet if I didn't want to get a lot worse. He then said he'd tell all the other kids in the neighborhood if I didn't vow silence. I was so scared and felt so beaten I cried some form of agreement. When the woman returned, she wiped off the chair and mopped the floor as everyone just looked on. I felt so guilty knowing it was my doing as I meekly stood and trembled. After she finished, she ordered everyone outside as she grabbed my arm and dragged me back upstairs and into her room. "So you insist on acting like a baby, do you? Well, we'll see how long you like being kept dressed like one." At that she ordered me to the floor and said I was going to get some fresh diapers and that they'd better last all day because I wouldn't get changed but once a day. I laid down on the hardwood floor as she went and retrieved some fresh diapers. I was shocked and horrified when I noticed she also had some baby powder this time. I felt my mind go limp as I shut out what was happening the best I could. The powder felt cool and smelled of baby, which gave me a new sensation and feeling of humiliation. I was stood back up and led into the hallway as she reminded me of no talking and instructions of how I was to act from now on. I was already filling one act, I was crying uncontrollably. Just as we reached the stairs, she stopped and told me to wait as she entered her daughter's room. I was still shaking from the ordeal when she returned and told me it was too cold for baby to be running around in just a diaper. At that she held up one of her daughter's older short dresses and said, "This will keep you from a chill." I stepped back in terror as she grew angry at my resistance and demanded obedience. My heart sunk to a new low as the dress slipped down over my body and I saw the short skirt flaring out from my waist. Again she took my hand and led me downstairs while telling me she was looking forward to having another baby girl to care for. My energy came back in a fury when I saw she intended to put me out in back with the other kids. The moment I opened my mouth with please, I was twirled around and given another hard swat on my bottom while reminded of my silence. The numbness returned with a vengeance as I felt my body go limp with defeat. I just gave in as she pushed me out the back door where the other kids looked on in shocked pleasure. I huddled the doorway as best I could, but it wasn't long before they were pulling me into the yard for further torments. Each one took turns flipping my short skirt to expose more of my diapers while telling me what a pretty little baby I was in my new dress and did dies. I might as well have been a statue because I just stood there and even stopped crying. I think I had finally cried out and resolved to give up completely to everyone's whims. Well, this is the best I can put in words the details of how I felt the first time I experienced diaper discipline. Over the next 2 years I fell prey several times to additional diapering and the woman always managed to make each event a little worse. Like the time I was diapered and put in the playpen with the baby, both of us in just a diaper. She told me to keep an eye on the baby and when the baby wet her diapers, I was to let her know. Not knowing her plans I did as she asked, only to find out her evil intent. As soon as she changed the baby, she took my diapers off and put the wet ones on me, telling me I was the real baby and should be the one in wet diapers. Another time she made me tell her just before I was about to wet myself and had the other children stand while she made me wet myself in front of them. I'm almost 60 years old now, and because of these horrid events, I developed a diaper fetish which seems both a blessing and a curse. Years after I left that boarding house, I returned to confront the woman, though I don't know what I had in mind to say. Her daughter had inherited the house and was married. The mother, my tormentor, died several years earlier. Fortunately, the daughter didn't remember me. I left somewhat angry, feeling the woman had cheated me by dying before I could confront her. Today diapers bring me the tranquil peace and surrender of all the stresses of life. In a way I return to that little boy who had all responsibility taken from him. Thanks for letting me give validation to my life by reading my biography and some fun in the additional fantasies. I hope you enjoyed it. The end. It all started when I was about 7-year-old. My sister, who was about 9, wanted some diapers so she could pretend that she was a mom and change her teddy bear's diapers. Well, I just thought what would it be like to wear a diaper again. Well, one night when my sister was at a friend's house, I sneaked into her room and grabbed a diaper. I went up to my room and put the diaper on. It was like heaven. It felt like I waited my entire life just to wear one. I wore them as much as possible. I loved them. I loved to pee and poop in them. I kept sneaking diapers out of my sister's room. One day I made the mistake of wearing one at night. I felt really tired and I fell asleep on the couch in just my diaper. My mom came home from work and found me on the couch in a diaper. At first I thought I was going to be in big trouble, but she just asked how long I have been wearing them and she told me not to do it again. Well, I kept wearing them even though she told me not to. They just felt so good that I had to wear diapers. She caught me stealing the diapers again. She told me if I loved them that much that she would go to the store and buy me some diapers. I could not believe it. She was really going to buy me diapers. It was like it was a miracle. She even changed me when I peed and pooped in them. Even till this day she still buys and changes my diapers. It's like I'm living in a good dream. The end.